Hey guys, Thumper here, and welcome to another DCS Liberation tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about all the UI and symbology in Liberation. So let's get to it. So when you first get into Liberation, there can be a lot to look at, and it can be pretty confusing if you don't know what it all means. So first, let's talk about the UI. UI just means user interface. So we're now on Liberation 9.0. Luckily, not too much has changed that's going to be relevant for us in any of these videos, so it's mostly still the same thing. We're currently looking at the Syria Operation Allied Sword campaign because this has most of the things I want to talk about today, but first, the UI is basically just, everything we're looking at here. So starting at the top, we have a toolbar with lots of little helpful tools. Underneath that, we have an intel bar with lots of helpful intel. Underneath that, we have our packages, which has all of our various mission plans for a given Liberation turn. Underneath that, we have the flights panel, which is going to have all of the flights in a given package. And over here we have our main battle map, our main theater, where we're going to actually manipulate things and set up flights to be doing what we want them to do. So as we look up at our toolbar, most of this isn't really relevant for actual mission planning, save for like the last four things. We have, new game, open, save. This will take you to Discord. This will take you to GitHub. This is how you submit a bug report, and this will give you information on the developer. Here we have our settings, which we talked about pretty in depth on the last video. So over here, we've got the last four things. So this right here is a graphical representation of the number of units that either faction has. So we can see here that our enemy has nearly 300 aircraft. We have nearly 100. And armor, they have nearly 80. We have nearly 60. And this will change as turns progress and units get destroyed and new units get purchased. And we can just kind of see a graphical representation of it as it happens. Next to that here, we have our notepad. In our notepad, we can type whatever we want into it and save it. And it will generate this as a knee board for the turn whenever we take off. Next to the notes, we have the air wing. And when we click the air wing, we can actually see all of the various squadrons that are available to us. And we can actually do some different things with them. So let's say we want to take, we have 12 unassigned Hueys here on the Pelelu. So if we go ahead and double click it, we can see what their primary task is, what missions it can actually do. And down here, this is what we're concerned with. We can actually transfer from here. So if we want them to move from the helicopter carrier to, let's say we want them to transfer to the John C. Stennis. So we click that, and then we close this out. Then we can actually see there's a ferry mission in which those Hueys are going to go from the helicopter carrier to the main carrier. The thing that's cool about transfers, though, is anytime you just want transfers to happen and you don't want to have to spam turns to make them happen, you can just pass turn and they will transfer from place to place without any extra flying needed. Next to the air wing, we have the ground transfers, and there's currently nothing here, but let's go ahead and click on, let's say, Ramat David. We're going to look at our ground forces, and we got a lot here. So let's say we want to transfer some units, and we want them to go from Ramat David to Haifa. So we're going to select Haifa, and there's different types. Auto is just going to be like a ground transfer where they just go from place to place. Airlift is going to need actual transport aircraft. So most of the time, just use auto, and it'll be much faster, much more efficient. And we can just select, however many vehicles we want to move and create transfer order. Doesn't look like anything happened, but if we click up here on transfers, we'll see that there's 12 units transferring from Ramat David to Haifa in a convoy. So That can just be helpful for getting units from one place to another quickly and efficiently, especially if you just use the pass turn to get it done. Moving down from the toolbar, we have our intel panel, and what's particularly relevant is our turn conditions here. So we have what time of day it is, our date and time, whether it's going to be daytime or nighttime. And over here we have the type of weather we're going to be encountering. So it's currently clear, but this will tell you if it's going to be overcast with rain or heavy clouds, and whether there's going to be a lot of wind in any given direction. This is obviously pretty relevant because, you know, if you're trying to drop bombs and you need to be able to see the deck through the T-pod, it's going to suck if you have a low-level overcast rain, and you are going to have a much more difficult time completing that mission. Here we have a quick reference for our budget, and we can see we currently have 56 million. We're about to make, once this turn completes, we're about to make 146 million. If we click on this, it'll actually give us a breakdown of what is contributing to our budget, but this same information can actually be seen over here. So this intel gives us a quick description. We're currently outnumbered for air superiority, slightly outnumbered for our front line, and strong disadvantage for our economic strength. And if we click on this, this gives us a much more detailed breakdown of everything going on. So here's our budget. Here's our air forces, where our squadrons are currently staged out of. Here's our ground forces and where they are currently positioned. And if we click up here, we can actually see the enemy info, and we can get a much better idea of their capabilities and where we want to be focusing our strength. Moving down further, we have our packages and flights. We're not going to be talking about this too much today, but in another video, we'll probably talk about, you know, what to be thinking about when planning missions for a turn of liberation. So that's going to bring us over to our main panel with our battle map. A couple things of note. Up here we have a ruler that gives a nice kind of quick reference of roughly how much distance is between any two given points. Down here, there's only one of these things that I really find relevant, which is the culling exclusion zones. I talked about this in the last video, but this will give you a good idea of what your performance is going to be like on a given turn, what's going to spawn in and what isn't going to spawn in. So you can toggle that on and off from right here. And over here we have this nice little panel where we can toggle on what we want to see and toggle off what we don't want to see. So we can see 3 different kinds of maps. I just like how the first one looks, so I leave it there. And we can toggle on things like we want to see enemy SAM threat range. We want to see enemy SAM detection range. Maybe we want to see allied SAM threat range, or we want to see allied blue flights. Maybe we want to see red flights. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to actually know what any of these flights are actually doing. You can kind of get a little description of them. Like we'll see that these Su-33s are on cap, and these Su-34s are on ground attack, but you won't actually know what missions they're doing. So with that toggled on, that's just one little way to, you know, kind of know what's coming if you want to. As we look at our map here, we have our blue assets, we have the enemy assets, and we have here in the center the orange front lines. The front lines are going to move forward and back along these red lines in between the different airfields. So in this example, we can actually see that as this front line were to move forward, eventually Beirut Rafiq Hariri would be captured, and from here, this front line would split into 2 front lines. So it is possible in this example that there would actually be 3 front lines on this particular map. Now, why is that relevant? Well, front lines have sometimes hundreds of units spawned in them because there's, 50 or so friendlies versus 50 or so enemies. They're all attacking each other, killing each other. And if there's 3 front lines, that's 3 times as many units. So if you have a lower end machine, this could affect your performance pretty heavily. So when you're first looking at the Liberation map and you're looking at all these symbols, it can be a little confusing as to what all of this is, but I promise you it's all a lot simpler than you think it is. Pretty much all of the assets in any given Liberation campaign can be divided into like 3 umbrella categories. First, you have units, you have resources, and you have bases. Units are super simple in that they're going to spawn in, they're going to engage anything if they have the opportunity to, and when you destroy them, they're gone. Now, this is how Liberation currently works. It's possible in the future that units will be replenishable, but for now, when you destroy them, that's it. They're gone. As we look at our map, we can find a few different examples of units. So, like EWRs could be considered a unit. We have groups of armor could be considered units. We have air defenses can be considered units. And even out here in the water, there's groups of ships that are individual units that can simply be destroyed, and they will be gone for the rest of this Liberation campaign. Anything that's a unit is just an obstacle, so if you like attacking enemy vehicles, this is where you want to look. They will engage you if they have the capability to do so, and when they're gone, they won't affect Liberation in any other way than they're just gone. The one unit symbol that's not included in this particular campaign that I generated here is the missile launcher symbol. Missile launchers are unique in that they spawn in and they just launch their missiles, and that's pretty much it. These come in the form of V2 rockets, Silkworm rockets, and Scud sights. In DCS, Scuds won't really affect much because they're like super inaccurate for some reason. The way they can affect you though is by depleting your air defenses pretty significantly. There will be a lot of times Scuds will launch, 3 missiles, and then a Patriot sight will use 20 missiles to try to intercept those 3 Scuds. And that can leave you open to other aircraft coming in to attack you later on. So I like to include them just because I like to see them, but they're not really usually relevant in any other way than that. The next type of symbol that we're going to see are going to be resources. Resources is anything that's going to contribute to the economy of either given faction. Resources can come in a bunch of different forms. Sometimes they can be bunkers, they can be tents, they can be command posts, they can be communications arrays, they can be fuel tanks. There's all different kinds of them. As we look on our map here, we can see a few different examples of resources. So like right here, we have fuel tank storage. Each of these are contributing to the income of our enemy faction. Here we have FARP tents, ammo storage, we have a command post. Some of my personal favorites are going to be these symbols here. These are going to be oil derricks. And then as we move out to the water, we have oil pumps, oil platforms. I personally love striking resources of my enemies, mainly because that's how it works in real life, right? Does it make more sense to drop a bomb on the tank, or does it make more sense to drop a bomb on the warehouse that is supplying 10 tanks? Attacking logistics is how actual wars are won. It also helps that in DCS it is super satisfying to see buildings of any kind get destroyed. So I definitely have a philosophy of destroying as many enemy resources as possible, except for one specific type. This symbol right here is for ammo depots. Now, ammo depots are relevant in their own special way. They're relevant because they actually supply the front line of the airfield that they are attached to. So if we click on Beirut, we can actually see there's 41 ground units. They have 51 deployable. And if we actually just hover over this, we'll see this expand, and we can see that there's 15 for the base, and then there's 12 per connected ammo depot, and there's 3 ammo depots connected. Now, our math there is there's 15 for the airfield, and then if we click on this, there's actually It's considering each of these an ammo depot. I know that's weird. These say hangars. I don't know why, but it is. These are the 3 ammo depots it's looking at. I know from experience. So if you destroy these, that would mean that they can only deploy 15 units to the front line. So why wouldn't I want to do that, Thumper? Why wouldn't I want to destroy that and make things easier for my frontline units to push up? The thing is, at some point, I'm going to presumably capture Beirut. And when I do, I cannot get this ammo depot back. So when my front lines move past Beirut and they start moving up, trying to get to these next airfields, I will only be able to deploy 15 units to each of these front lines. And they'll be completely outnumbered, and they'll probably get destroyed every single time. So it's making things harder on yourself to destroy these ammo depots in the long run. It's just something to think about. Otherwise, I totally recommend destroying logistics buildings as much as possible. The last category of symbols that we have are bases. Bases are unique in that they can actually house air units of some kind. They come in the form of FOBs, FARPs, airfields, and carriers. As we look at our map, anything that's considered a base is going to be represented by either a dark blue symbol or a dark red symbol. So up here we have these symbols with the X through them. These are going to be FOBs. These are only going to be able to deploy things like helicopters or things that can take off vertically. Versus here we have actual airfields that are going to have a proper runway for fighters to take off from. And as we move out to the water here, we can actually see our carriers. So we have helicopter carriers, which are similar to FOBs in that it's going to be short takeoff and land. And we have our full-size carriers, which can take off a significantly higher amount of aircraft. Bases are always going to be pretty well defended. If it's an airfield, it's probably going to have some sort of long-range air defense. And if it's a carrier, that's a whole different story. This actually leads me to a little bit of a tangent, because if you're new, you might not necessarily know just by looking at Liberation. Let's take a moment and talk about different kinds of ships in DCS. Ships in DCS have pretty heavily varying levels of difficulty. So let's show some threat ranges here. You can generally get a good idea of the capabilities of the ships you're trying to attack based on the threat ring that they pose. So if we look here at our destroyers, the Arleigh Burkes, they have a huge threat ring. This means that an enemy is going to have to get within like 40 miles, 60 miles to even get close to attacking the ship, and they're going to have a really difficult time doing it. Versus here, we have something like these Molniyas, these various types of corvettes and frigates. These are short range, and these have a small enough threat ring that you can actually just fly over them and drop a bomb on them right through the deck. These lighter symbols represent individual ships, meaning if you went to attack this group, there would be 2 of these destroyers here. That's why it's not necessarily apparent when looking at this that these are carrier groups. So if you click on this, it just shows one single carrier. But this is actually going to be escorted by probably 2 destroyers or 2 frigates of some sort. So this will be a group of 3 ships. And then over here, the John C. Stennis only shows 1 carrier, but it is also going to be escorted by probably 2 destroyers and 2 frigates. So this is going to be a group of 5 ships. In real life, carrier strike groups are country cripplers. They are extremely capable, extremely well defended groups of ships. Destroying even 1 ship in a carrier strike group is a nearly impossible task, and DCS reflects this pretty well. You would need to dedicate nearly all of your resources in an entire region into destroying a carrier strike group to even get close. This means that if you're choosing an enemy faction that has a carrier strike group, that strike group is probably going to be an obstacle for the rest of the game. Now, with all that understood, carrier groups are pretty cool because you do have a little bit of command over them. So you can actually just click and drag them. And you can give them a command to move somewhere else on the map. Now, you can actually just right click if you want to cancel that. So say we did get to the end of the game and we wanted to try to go up against this other carrier group. Well, we could actually start to get our own ships involved once we get close enough. For me, most of the time, my ships are just going to kind of stay where they are, and I'm not going to really touch them too much, but sometimes it is helpful to move them forward just to do various tasks. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. On the next one, we're going to be talking about setting up squadrons and what to kind of be thinking about when doing so. And so if you like this one, definitely like, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you there.